The B Shifter podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever else you get your podcasts. All podcasts are also on our YouTube channel. Just go to B Shifter on YouTube and share, like, and subscribe. Help us spread the word. Thanks for listening to the B Shifter podcast. Welcome to the B Shifter podcast. We've got John Vance here today, along with Josh Blum, and we will have a panel of esteemed fire service professionals checking in with us today because our topic is training scars, which really are a lot of times a symptom of organizational scars, things that are left over from past generations of leaders and trainers, or just something that you do within your organization because that's the way you've always done it. So we'll get more into that today. It's really an insightful topic, and we'd like you to share what you believe your training scars are, or training scars that you've witnessed in the fire service since you've been in. So we'll make this interactive today. We'd love to hear from you, and I think this is an ongoing topic because it really helps us identify ways to improve training and ways to improve our organizations. So before we get started on that, how are you doing today, Josh? It's May 1st, May Day. Welcome to the first day of May.
I'm doing really good. It's happy to be on here today. Weather finally broke here in Cincinnati. So got a lot Blue Card's got a lot of stuff going on. Been connecting a lot with the ARF folks that are looking to connect with the ARF certification program, and then the conference only being 5 months away is, that's right. It's coming right up on us now. So that registration's really been picking up, and then trying to find room in our schedule to, accommodate some of the classes that people are looking for. So it's good. I mean, we're not booked up through the end of the year, but we have limited availability, I would say, between now and the end of the year for any classes. So, yeah.
There's only one big box class really with any seats in it left, and that's in July in Colorado. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's only just that one big box class that has any seats left. We got a couple that are full, but the Windsor, Colorado big box class, first part of July has some seats open in it, and then that's it until 2026 for the big box classes.
And then for the conference, we have a hotel block available that has either 160 rooms or less, depending on if they're getting booked up right now. So we really want to encourage people, along with getting the early bird price for the Blue Card Hazard Zone Conference coming to the Cincinnati area in September, October. End of September really is our workshops. We have various workshops there. And then the general conference, October 2nd and 3rd. We have two hotels we're affiliated with. The one is our preferred hotel. And how many rooms are left? And these are really deep discounts that people are going to be able to get if they follow the link either on the B Shifter site or if they get into the show notes.
Yeah, so the Hyatt connected to the convention center, I think they might have like 40 rooms maybe left. And their rate, again, they kept us at the same rate we've had for the last 2 years that we've been there. So I think the most expensive room is $149, but they have a room down to $129. And then that Delta Hotel by Marriott that's across the street, still right there, super close. Their room rate's $129 a night. So that's about $100 off the price of any of the other hotels. So take advantage of getting your rooms booked in that hotel room block before those rooms are sold out. And we've had quite an uptick this weekend in registration for the conference. So I think we a little over 100 and some seats went out this week. I think when I looked, there was like 350 seats left maybe total for the conference. So, and then obviously with that, the workshops are starting to fill up. So that May Day workshop, we had 100 people last year, and it's filling up very quickly now. Also, it's over halfway full. And then we got that critical thinking, strategic decision-making model, workshop that's filling up, the expanded command workshop that has seats left in it, the safety train the trainer. So on that, the safety train the trainer, the 2-day classroom, you leave with the curriculum package. It does not include the prop, obviously, is $345. So you get the 2 full days of classroom and the entire curriculum package. And then the prop would be made available to you at a much discounted rate compared to us sending instructors on site, to your organization to do that train the trainer. And then we still got the certification lab posted. We've had quite a bit of interest in it. We're just waiting to see how that goes. So a lot of stuff going on. It always comes up and is asked because through cities and HR and all those people that take care of the booking and so on. Lunch is provided both days, snacks and beverages. Actually, not both days, every day. So if you're in a workshop, lunch is provided too. And then that Thursday night, we're going to do that meet and greet again at the Third Eye Brewing, which is always good. Last year it was really nice outside, and it was packed everywhere, inside, outside, upstairs. That was good. It's always good to network and connect with everybody and meet with all the B shifters out there from, Massachusetts to California and Washington to Florida. And then, our Canadian friends and, people from all around the world. So, we're looking forward to it, and just 5 months away. So, take advantage of the early bird pricing and getting your hotel room blocked.
bshifter.com. Go there to get all the information and also to sign up. So we'd love to see you in Sharonville at the end of September, beginning of October for the 2025 Blue Card Hazard Zone Conference.
John, something that always comes up from that, and that people read past it, I guess, but if your fire department is putting anybody online, you're going to pay $385 for an online account. So if you register somebody at $485, we give you a free online account. So it's really, if you were going to put one person online at your fire department, it's costing you $100 to come to the 2-day conference, as far as the conference price. So it's a good deal. You can take advantage of it. And if you sign up 5 people, then you get 5, online accounts transferable to anybody in your own organization within the year. So,
and to get the lodging for the prices that we have it too. It's just, you can't find that. You and I are attending some conferences this year, and we are paying, I think, quadruple wherever we're going for any rooms. So we have a great value with the rooms.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. See you in Cincinnati. It'll be a good one. So today, the topic, training scars, organizational scars. We had a really busy week last week at the AVBCTC while we were doing a train the trainer class. There was a number of things going on in town, including some NFPA meetings. So we were visited by Dan Madrzykowski, Keith Stake, some other people stopped by during the week. So it was really cool to be able to sit down and talk to people. And one of these topics that came up in the lunchroom while we're eating pizza one day was training scars and what training scars are, how they manifest themselves in your organization out in the field while we're actually delivering service. So I think it would be good to go to Dan Madrzykowski first to set this up, because he has a good explanation and a good example of some training scars. Then we'll come back and talk about what Dan has to say. And then we're also joined today by Chris Stewart, Pat Dale, Keith Stakes, Nick Bernasini, and Terry Garrison. Then Josh has some examples that we'll do on the back end too. So really chock full episode today. We're glad you're here. Let's go over to Dan Madrzykowski talking about training scars.
Flow water, right? Many times the firefighter goes into their big day in suppression in the Class A burn building, and they're told, don't put the fire out. And that is a muscle memory that they take with them to the field, such that when we're doing acquired structure burns and doing research and we want them to flow water, we've got gauges on the hose line. So we want to measure how much water it takes to put that fire out. And they're effectively doing soda pop firefighting, psst, 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 and not letting it flow. So again, some people were teaching penciling and some of the flashover simulators. What we want the message to be out there is you should be flowing and moving. If you have a vent limited fire condition, heavy black smoke, coming out of a door or over your head, you should be flowing from that point and just flow and move and keep going. And that'll be effective for you to keep it from flashing over, keep it from flashing over behind you. And if there's victims in front of you, it'll start cooling it off for them as well. It's really hard to burn things that are wet. Another training scar unrelated to suppression is the emergency activation button. We've been involved in a number of near misses. And one of the things that come up in the review of the incidents are how come the firefighters never push their EAB? And that is a training scar from the academy where if you have all your radios in there in your CAD system, what do you tell the cadet? Do not push that. Never push that, right? So really you need to get some radios that are not part of the CAD system that you can use for training so they get it in their muscle memory to push that button and see what happens.
So that's Dan Madrzykowski from FSRI talking about training scars, a couple of them. First of all, let's talk about that penciling, moving and flowing water. And we see it happen all the time. I've seen it in the field. I've been seeing it for 20 years plus since we've been using the flashover chamber, because you take brand new firefighters, we bring them into these flashover containers. It's the first time that they're in any kind of heat and smoke. And then we're telling them, pencil it. So they're not putting the fire out and we're getting the desired fire behavior. While we want to create that fire behavior, that's a good thing. We're also reinforcing some muscle memory there, as Dan points out, of not flowing water and actually putting the fire out. Your thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, we've seen that for about my entire career, and it's you're in the burned building and you want to be able to get the fire going again. So you don't want water everywhere because, like Dan said, anything that's wet is really hard to burn. So we default to trying to fix the problem by not having them put as much water on the fire, and that becomes a problem. I mean, I've read some near miss reports in the last couple of years where companies got caught and the person on the nozzle quit flowing water, and it's like, it doesn't hurt to flow water. Keep flowing water, right? So I mean, I really don't have much else to say but what Dan said there, right? I mean, he knows and he sees it. And then when they're doing, field exercises, I know that they have to communicate to those people, hey, we want you to put this fire all the way out, and we want you to flow water until the fire is completely out. And whether we put 50 gallons in a room or put 300, 400, 500 gallons in a room, it don't matter. There's water in the room or in that space now anyway. So, yeah, it's a simple one, but it's one that makes a big difference for sure.
On the EAB button that Dan brings up, because this is kind of a controversial issue in a way, because there's a lot of us, including the departments I've been with, where we don't even activate the EAB button because of past false trips. Mm-hmm. Now, today, we posted on bshifter.com, or yesterday, a NIOSH report out of North Carolina, just released this week. We will include that NIOSH report in the show notes. A firefighter who was killed in the line of duty during an apartment fire. During the May Day, the EAB button was pushed. They were having some trouble with the radio system. There were bonks. It points out in the NIOSH report, the EAB button was pushed. So I think that's a tie-in, and we'll include that report. But what's your thoughts on the EAB button as we continue to talk about this topic?
So the EAB button to me is it's like any other piece of technology, right? I mean, there's people out there who still, no way possible, don't ever use it, don't push it. This is what it does. Well, the bigger problem is we have a portable radio that's thousands of dollars that has technology in it that we, the fire service, use 10% of. And maybe we use more than that, but in all honesty, there's 1,000 channels in that radio. I can talk to everybody in the state of Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana. It can be tracked via GPS. They can turn it on at the dispatch center. They can turn it off at the dispatch center. They can patch it. They can make my radio switch channels. I mean, they could do all of that from the dispatch center. So the biggest issue with the EAB thing to me is we didn't know how it worked. We don't know what it does. We didn't know that it is programmable like it is. We took the approach of, oh, that's for the police department so that they can push the button so it doesn't look like they're talking on the radio or they're fighting somebody, they can push the button. When in reality is, if you set it up properly, it will do exactly what you want it to do. It's like any other programmable button that's on any electronic device out there. And, NIOSH actually released a bulletin probably within the last 2 years about the EAB button and using the EAB button. And we had quite a discussion with Murray and some of the folks that worked on that bulletin about the EAB. And it's like, well, when you put that out, you need to make sure that people need to use it, but before they use it, they do need to make sure that it does what they want it to do. And, an example, just here in this greater Cincinnati, Ohio area, if you were in a different county and it was going through a different dispatch center, the EAB button was going to do something else, and it was sending them somewhere else. But through our communications working group and everybody getting on the same page with all of their radios being programmed with the same template by the same people, the EAB button actually does exactly what we want it to do now. So when they push the EAB button, they stay on the channel that they're on. And that's exactly what we do want to happen. And there's been plenty of events where the EAB button is valuable, right? Because it does take priority over the rest of the communications, and it can be set up that way. And then the only other people that can really talk over it is the dispatch center. But it can be programmed also so that the dispatch center can, if it is enabled, that the dispatch center could disable it so that, it could open the radio system back up. So, the using it was because, quite frankly, some of our industry's ignorance on how it really worked and what it does and what it doesn't do. And a Motorola radio is different than a Kenwood radio, different than all those other radios. But really, our radios it's like the cell phone, the capability of it. The limitation is in the user, probably not in the device. So that's my 2 cents on the EAB button. And I do think for a long time I was against it, John. You and I had some conversations about that. And it's like, when we went out and educated ourselves and found out how it really works and how we can engage with the dispatch center and what they can do with it and what we can do with it and how it's programmed, it does definitely it has a huge value. So.
Well, our next member of the panel today that we're going to hear from is Chris Stewart. Chris Stewart is a lead instructor with Blue Card, spent a number of years with the Phoenix Fire Department as a battalion chief and on down the ranks, and deputy chief in a small department in Arizona. And Chris here is going to share what he has witnessed as far as training and operational scars.
If you think about like organizational training scars or mistakes that we've made in our careers or organizations have made in their careers, I think one that comes to mind first and foremost is when you're introducing new things into an organization. And so granted, my experience is in the Phoenix Fire Department. So introducing new or cutting edge things for a good portion of my career, at least the first half or 2/3 of my career was kind of expected. We all recognized it. It became no big deal, but later on it became more of a big deal when you tried to make change. And so I'm thinking back to when we first started talking about new fire behavior research that was coming out and starting to change the way we were going to do business, really. And there's a small minority, whatever 10, 20% that truly become the naysayers or the rock throwers or the folks that are not. It doesn't matter. They're the contrarians. They're gonna argue against it no matter what, or no matter how good it is for them or anything like that. But because they don't want to make that change, and allowing the organization then to focus their training and focus the message on the naysayers, and it actually takes away from the growth and development of the folks who are actually interested and really, really want to start doing it. So we focus on the people and the problems that they're posing rather than talking to the majority of folks who are interested and really actually starting to think about, okay, how can we implement this? And you really kind of stunt your overall development in the organization because you're fixated on these things when you're like, No, we shouldn't even be talking to that 20%, directly at least. They should be hearing it. But let's talk to the people the fast adopters and the folks who are really interested in making these things happen and willing to change. And when you allow the negative voices to get the dominant attention, I guess, in the training system, is you really slow everything down. It grinds everything else to a halt. All the other members are thinking, can we just get past this? No, there's things here we want to do. We want to actually be better. And the majority's frustrated with the minority in that. So one of the greatest scars I can see, and I can see it in my career, is the fact that we ended up paying too much attention to the naysayers and the contrarians, and didn't actually match the pace and the speed and the development of the folks who are really, really interested. So I know for me, as a focus now, is I'm paying attention to the people who are paying attention and who want to push forward. And I'm pacing with them. I'm not pacing with the as John Hinton would say, the idiots and the unloved.
Good one there from Chris Stewart from Blue Card, and tons of years of experience in the fire service. So often, Josh, we focus on the lowest common denominator. And oftentimes we design our training programs around that. And the industry experts, I mean, when I say industry, leadership experts tell us to focus on the people in the middle and the high performers, and not to focus on the lowest common denominator. But unfortunately, in our business, it's oftentimes the lowest common denominator that are the ones causing the problems up to getting us hurt and killed.
Yeah, it seems like we spend 90% of our time dealing with 10% of the people that you're trying to get to come around. And just as Chris said, that holds up everybody else, and it actually holds up your whole organization from moving forward. And at some point, that grinds enough on those people that they're like, I'm done with it too. Like, we're not doing what we need to do. And I kind of compare that to something I say to you every day, John Vance. I only see forward. I have no time to look in my rearview mirror, and I have no time for the bullshit. Like, there's people out there who want to do stuff, and that's what we're going to do. If you look at it kind of like we're planting seeds and we're growing trees, and yet at some point we're going to have fruit. Well, that tree that's back there that's dead already, I could give a shit. It's dead. There's nothing I can do with it. Like, and what I mean by that is, I'm not going to give attention to something that I'm not going to change. Right? They always are going to have something to say, always something to complain about, and you have to focus on the majority, and you have to keep your organization, in the headlights and moving forward. Full steam ahead. So.
The next member of the panel is Pat Dale. Pat Dale is also a Blue Card instructor, longtime fire chief from the West Coast areas, both in Washington and Oregon. And he's going to talk about really the way that chief officers and other leaders within the organization treat people, and how that ends up becoming culturally learned behavior throughout the organization.
Exactly what it is, learned behavior that I witnessed. And I remember thinking about this, and as I watched a deputy chief and an assistant chief, as they interacted with our membership, they were treating people poorly. They were condescending, they were dismissive, they would cut them out, and to the point where they were telling them, look, this is a paramilitaristic organization. You're in here to be seen, not heard. When the crews were just asking them questions and trying to get clarity on a policy or what the hell, what do you want us to do? That's what was the response. And so I thought, they've been here for 25 and 30 years through these fire chiefs that I was aware of that were more command and control, autocratic leaders, do as I say, and that's what they came up through. And then I think when they got to those leadership positions, they felt like that's the way they had to be, and the way that they had to lead with the organization was what they had been. They didn't know what leadership in a different way, like with empathy and kindness and caring and being nice. They didn't know what that looked like. They may have gone to a conference down here at the Biltmore and heard people talk about be nice, but to go back and then they slip right back into what their learned behavior was what had been modeled by these command and control chiefs. So I think that's what comes to mind for me at the training SCAR.
You think another driving issue for that would be maybe they just didn't have an answer for them too, and it was just easier to demean them than to actually have a cognate answer to their question?
Well, absolutely. Much easier to take that firm position and shut up. I don't. And in the back of their mind, they didn't have an answer.
Yeah,
they weren't.
So it just kind of became their default knee-jerk reaction to any kind of.
They took it as confrontation.
Yeah,
and it was truly just a question. You know? But they took it as you're questioning me,
challenging my authority.
Yeah. And the people that I saw come on the strongest in that way were also people that were really unsure of themselves. They didn't know what they were doing. They were over their head. They had been promoted up beyond where they should have been. They would come on really strong with control. I can think of, the names are in my head with two people I saw over my time and they would come on so strong, and I knew it was because they didn't know what they were doing, frankly.
I think a trait of individuals like that is they're not interested in learning the details of their job because they're too busy pursuing their next promotion. And so they think the answer is just to promote to the point I don't have to give you an answer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, just because
You've seen it.
Yeah, I'm so much more ranky than you are.
Right.
That's Pat Dale and Nick Brunacini there as well. And I think so oftentimes people within organizations get promoted to the training chief or training officer role, and their role model is Louis Gossett Jr. from An Officer and a Gentleman, where they want the lineups and, what's your name, Mr. Mayonnaise? And then in that environment, people aren't allowed to ask questions. They aren't allowed to drill down why we're actually doing what we're doing, because a lot of times, like Nick and Pat said there, they don't know. They really don't know. So they're covering it with a lot of other ego and BS, right?
Oh yeah. Everybody else out in the fire world has hijacked Chief Lester's 3 C's. So I'm gonna go ahead and use it on here too. When those people who act out like that act the way they do, they are not competent, which leads to they have no confidence, which leads them to only one other C left, that they feel like I'm just in control and I have more bugles than you, so I'm in charge. And it's like, it doesn't work. What does work is when you are competent and you are confident and you have confidence in your people and you're trying to build the right thing. And then the control thing kind of just comes naturally because people get on board.
I want to talk about being nice here because Pat mentioned it. And we had a conversation around coffee then after we recorded this. And and I wish we would have captured this, a lot of being nice isn't just being kind and soft-hearted. Being nice means we're not going to let our people die and get injured because we're not looking out for them or they don't know their job. Being nice means that we're training them effectively so that they are confident and competent and have control, and that they're not just wondering why we're doing the things that we do. So oftentimes I think people don't really understand what Chief Bruno meant by be nice, but being nice means that we're going to take care of our people. And sometimes that means being tough. Sometimes that means holding them accountable and having a standard.
Yeah, John, thank you for saying accountable, because that's a huge one for me, right? Like, yeah, the be nice thing is helping that person be successful, right? That's a piece of that for me. And part of that is the accountability piece. And that comes back to what, Pat said. If they ask questions, you owe them an answer. Like, there's a line there, I guess, in a way, but like if they have a legit question, then we owe them an answer. And that's part of that being nice. And then once they know, then you can hold them accountable, right? So, there's a whole circle there, but being exposed to some of that environment in my past of the control, you're going to do what I told you to do, it don't work. And people don't stay and keep working in that environment.
I had an officer once with their collar brass, and he would say, it's pick and choose. And I get to pick and choose what we're going to do today without actually explaining to us why we're doing what we're doing. And it just led to a lot of ineffective behaviors.
Yeah. And when you look at those organizations that operate that way, if they're not standing over your shoulder, those people ain't doing shit. Right. I mean, it's like there's
no ownership.
You will be much more successful together.
Well, we'll bring it back to the task level here a little bit with Keith Stakes. Keith Stakes is from FSRI as well, and he stopped by the AVB CTC last week and was part of this conversation. And he's talking about actually the way that we train.
Well, specifically in regards to suppression, we don't have adequate facilities to be able to teach folks suppression in the residential environment. 80 to 90% of the fires we're going to are in the residential environment. It doesn't matter whether that's an 800 square foot Cape Cod or an apartment on the 40th floor of a high rise. The suppression tactics focus on surface cooling and understanding where and how to use air to your advantage and where to get water onto those surfaces to have the quickest impact. And yet we're training in buildings that are masonry, which when you have live fire within those are going to create training scars in folks that they're worried about steam generation on the fireground. When we know that water application to hot gypsum or plaster and lath, it's not going to respond the same as it would masonry, along the same lines, metal shipping containers. And you take that a step further and you look at all the shipping container training facilities, there's not a flat surface anywhere to be seen. And we rely on our residential suppression tactics, utilizing those flat surfaces to get better coverage. That's one example. And the other, again, being the fact that we're dealing with 1403 compliant packages that is a wood-based fuel package in a fixed spot within the room. The building itself is not involved. It's not spreading throughout the structure. And so people will have a point and shoot mentality whenever they see orange flame on the fireground, when again, the orange flame is the symptom, we have to treat the source. And so we see water going towards wherever the orange flame is instead of thinking, where is my surface that is the problem that's generating fuel to come burn where there's air? And so in the suppression world, at least, those are two examples of how we set our folks up for failure before they ever even leave the academy.
All right, that's Keith Stakes from FSRI. Josh, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, he's definitely the SME on the surface cooling and using air to your advantage and all those things he talked about. But just talking generally about buildings and these people go into the same exact building over and over and over again. The layout's exactly the same, limited or no furniture, limited or no turns in the building. And that's where they train at over and over and over again. And then they have an event at, that residential setting that 70% of the space in the residential setting is not open space because there's furniture and other clutter and whatever. And people get lost, turned around, whatever. So, all the way down to the search training and a Class A building. When people say, "Oh, we're doing search training in this Class A building," it's like that's a joke. Like, you're kidding me, right? Like, there's nothing in this thing. Like, you're using fake smoke, which cool, but the layout and arrangement and all that isn't what it is. So that training in context is a real thing, and obviously with the 1403 standard, it makes it challenging to create a real fire environment. But all we can do is go back to the basics and be really, really good at that. So really our crawl, walk, run. So we need to spend more time at that crawl and walk and then when we're to the run part, trying to get people to, go back to the crawl and walk part to make sure that we're really doing what we need to do inside those buildings, because we cannot create in the training environment. Research environment, you can create it, but in the training environment, you can't create that environment because of the standards that we're up against that are there for good reason, because we through our careers have done so many dumb things that we shouldn't have done. And it's like, well, if that's good, this must be better. And why don't you throw a couch on it or, whatever. But you got to make training, a little bit more realistic to line up with what our job is. And that doesn't necessarily mean like, the fire and, making it blazing hot, but like even even interior arrangement and layout when you're advancing hose lines and doing searches and operating inside the building. That it has to be realistic. And to be the first time on here, I've jumped to it, John, but I'm going to. It's the sports thing, right?
Mhm.
So our own team's practice defense is going to play against our real offense. Well, that our makeup defense is going to try to emulate the best they possibly can the team that we're about to play so that we know how we're going to operate there. Well, in the fire service, that's what we need to do as well. Another task thing, super simple thing. Doing forcible entry in the middle of a parking lot with your uniform on and not wearing anything and full visibility is as fake as it gets. I mean, that's the crawl part, right? Like teaching very basic skills and then maybe getting to the walk. But at some point that needs to be done, full scale.
And I think that the training mentality, as you're planning that as a training officer or company officer, you need to acknowledge that crawl, walk, run. We're going to start here on the crawl, in the parking lot, on the prop, and then there's going to be at end of the road where we have an acquired structure or a training building where we're doing that under actual conditions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, when we're stretching hand lines, there's probably 20 parts to that. Like if you were training a recruit, like what does that look like? Just getting the line stretched, ready to go at the front door. Well, when you get to the run part, they should be sitting in the back of the truck with their gear on, with their seatbelt on, with their headset on, the whole 9 yards, right? Like they're pulling up to an incident. And then you can run that exercise. And that's why we see the fire departments that, stretch a line and it's like, man, they're really good. Well, they're really good because they practice that way, right? The team who wins is the one who put in the most time and practice to beat what they know that they're coming up against. And we should do better with that. But far too often in training, it's the shortest shortcut that we can make to just get through it. And in some cases, it's hey, John, why don't you just show us this and then we'll move on. But we're getting sidetracked. We should move on.
Well, our next comment comes from one of our other experts, our head silverback, Nick Brunacini, talking about training and organizational scars.
You're training individuals, like the after action review. That's for like individual performance. There's a small element for your task level piece. But most of it is really to look at the entire scope of the incident operation. So using an example, in 1983, we had a fire, sprinkler controlled fire in a carpet warehouse. So the fire is under control, but the products of combustion are not. So it's full of cold smoke laden with carbon monoxide, right? Highest CO level because the fire is being controlled by sprinkler heads, but it's smoldering in racks of carpet. Crew gets there, they advance their attack line through the Bayside offices, and it's really not an attack. What they're doing is they're going in to find where the sprinkler heads are going off. That's what they're doing because the fire's already under control, and then they're going to do final extinguishment maybe. Well, one of them, they run out of air. The captain and the firefighter inside the building. So in fact, Frank Cheatham was the captain on Engine 23. It was before Mayday existed as a term. And he said, we're in trouble on the inside. I don't know where I am. And you could hear his thing's almost out of air. It's about done ringing. And he says, come and get me. Well, they end up getting Frank. They pull him out. And when they get him out, he is in respiratory arrest. John Valenzuela intubates him. They throw him in the back of an AMR ambulance, and he's heading to the hospital. So Frank's dead, right? Clinically dead. He's still got pulses. He wakes up halfway to the hospital, extubates himself, says goodbye to his dead grandmother. And then about a week later, we added another engine to a report of a working fire to be the Rapid Firefighter Rescue Crew. So when you said working fire, you got, usually we would send 2 engines, ladder, battalion chief to structure fires, house fires. And then you'd send 4 and 2 to commercial. So you send a 2 and 1, you get a 3rd engine when you say working fire. And they were just going to stand by. Well, eventually that became Rick. And that's happening across the whole fire service. Like you talk to the guys in New York, and they said in the 70s we had fast teams we put in for the same reason. Philadelphia was doing stuff. Big, busy fire departments had issues with the attack and firefighters having Maydays, and they had to have a response to that. So in the early 80s, this became rapid intervention, was born. And we were one of the departments that did. I mean, there was a group of them just by need. So that system goes on. Well, in 2001, we had the Southwest Supermarkets fire. And we have used this system now for damn near 20 years of RICS and all of the itinerations and revisions. And then on that breezy March day is that whole system cooked. And it cooked the command system too. So we used that after action review, and it took us a couple years to figure out exactly how to fix those problems. And part of it became the rapid intervention was not rapid, and we did those drills and those studies. And so it took 20 minutes for basically 2.5 RIC teams to get a firefighter down out of the building, and 20% of the RIC team rescuers had their own Mayday. So we thought this is not as effective as we thought it was. And then the other element to it was tactical supervision was not in place by most of the fire service wasn't using it. You know who used it the most is FDNY. They used tactical supervision the best of any fire department. Phoenix was using the command, the strategic piece, kind of at the top level, and then FDNY, they made up for their strategic, not using strategic with tactical bosses running the tactics of the thing. So we came out of that and said, no, if you have an attack position that's active and you've got 3 companies there, you need you need a chief officer to manage that area. Well, a captain could do it. That's what all the captains said. We're as good. And you're like, this has nothing to do with that. You're task zone supervisors. You can't do entry control, which is a requirement of any tactical level supervision, is you got to control who goes in and out of your attack position. Well, we could do it. Well, you're inside the building. You don't do entry control. So that kind of became the fix. So, and then really, you looked at it as that was the only structural firefighting fatality during my career. And you look at other fire departments and what happens after a line of duty death, and it's ripe with disagreement and tension. So if you don't have a strong process for kind of getting through all that, you're going to have a lot of upside down social situations within the organization. So because we stuck to the work and then everybody was familiar with it, is you processed it around the work, is that became the difference in the thing. And then I think to speak to that even more with like training rash is what ended up happening is the operations division ended up taking over training and safety. So we made the chief's aides safety officers to eliminate a safety division that was not helping the operations division at all. They had their own mission and it had nothing to do with managing the work we did. So once we did that, the true executive level of the fire department loved it because they got like 6 positions back. And then we took over training strategically and tactically. And if the fire chief had stayed another 5 years, we would have taken over the training academy. That's what was going to happen next. Because we were already visiting. The shift commanders were dealing with the training staff at the academy and saying, you got to change some stuff. This deal that you work them till they're out of air and then they have to work more. We're done with the rights of manhood that these fake benchmarks that you have to be a superior firefighter, or they're out of whack. You need to balance them and make them more realistic. You can't, if you're out of air, you're out of air and you need to leave before you're out. So, and that was a big thing that came out of all of that after the recovery effort, and the academy never caught up to it because you have a unique set of officers, and they're good people, and they're fiercely competent in many cases, but they have a different view of what the tactical and strategic levels look like. It doesn't connect to reality and what their view of the world is. So there's some of those company officers that you just need to say, no, we're the bosses, and this is the way this is going to happen. As an example of that, is the fire chief came out and said, we are not going to operate on top of lightweight residential new tile roofs. So it's done. If you're a ladder if you work for the Phoenix Fire Department and there's a brand new house on fire and it's got a clay tile roof, you cannot get on the roof. Period. Well, there was 36 people that said no. The deal about paying toll into Manhattan. Oh, if you do that, children will die. And you're like, no, the children will not die, and you will not die. So the problem is we know a lot more about this than you do, and we're your boss, and you're just not going to do it. Well, what if I do? You're going to have a different boss. Well, where are you going to go? I'm not going anywhere. You are. Yeah. I can tell you what that's going to look like, bucko. I ain't missing a check. There was an old chief who fixed the personnel problem. And they said, we've been screwing with that guy for 10 years. How'd you fix it? He says, you guys been talking to his head. I talked to his wallet. And he says his banker told him what was wrong with his behavior. Yeah, he ain't making his house payment next month. Oh, wow. That's a boss. Yeah, I mean, that's a tough way to do it. And I think that's kind of it, is the organization has to take control of basic task level functions. That's the job of the leadership of the department. So that would be my look at it more that way. And see, when you look at it in that terms, we're like, the first thing you're looking at is, do I need to correct something with the system? Then I think we all buy into it more, because it's like, well, yeah, it's all of us in the system that we all connect to, and then we look at it personally of how we did and performed. And usually, like most of the people I worked with wanted to hear that. They wanted to have an after-action review after a fire. How'd we do? Well, we did great. We'll talk about it for 3 minutes, and then we'll go eat lunch. But you're the most fantastic people I've ever known, the most capable. And you did lovely work here.
So that's Nick Brunacini talking about some of the really genesis of the rapid intervention team. And I think a lot of times, to start off with, Josh, we do things in the fire service that were started to solve a problem. And in this case, firefighters being lost, trapped inside of structures. So we came up with a team that was going to take care of it. But no one ever actually measured the effectiveness of that. Until the Southwest supermarket. And then we learned a lot from that. But to this day, we're still talking to people who are using a theoretical solution to problems that they themselves have not tested or actually measured.
Yeah, I think the fire side of our industry is really good at latching onto something and not letting go of it until we see ourselves that it doesn't work in our own organization, and not looking at what's going on around everywhere else. And I'll just compare that to the EMS industry. You know, if there's a new thing comes out, when the Life Pack 500 comes out, we're going to be trying to buy it, right? And learn what it does and how it monitors and all of that stuff. And the fire side of it, it's that tradition thing. We latch onto it and we hold on to it, and really we don't even know why. It's just what we do. And until organizations understand why, they don't change. So with how fast everything's moving nowadays, stuff's going to change. I mean, it kind of lines back up to the whole conversation of the change with fire environment and all of that. I mean, that's not new. I mean, people say, oh, this is all new. And it's like, it's not new anymore. Like if that was an EMS thing, we'd have been on to 10 other things by now. But because it's the fire department piece, we like latch on to that. And it's like, oh, it's new. We still don't quite believe in that yet. And it's like, well, there's plenty of science out there, and there's plenty of organizations that go to plenty of fires that are, practicing the new way, if you will, right? And basically it just comes down, we should continue to evolve and as we say all the time, we should always be in a state of fixing ourselves. This worked today, but we're looking for the next solution already.
Nick mentions it here, and we talk about it a lot. And I think if you took the blue card team and we were going to draw an org chart for the perfect organization, training would work for operations. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes we see organizations that are flat, that they have a lot of assistant chiefs, and the equal rank is operations and training. Mm-hmm. And those two, and there's some wonderful training officers out there. I'm not trying to degrade what the training chiefs do, but unless it's aligned with what is actually happening in the field, mm-hmm. you end up with a department of fire theory a lot of times and not practical application in the field. And I think that's what Nick's getting at when he talks about the training division really not being aligned with what was going on in operations. And we see that every day in our jobs, right? Because we deal with hundreds, if not thousands, of fire departments out there that have separate training divisions that aren't connected to operations.
Yeah. The operations division and the organization decides, really what they're going to do and really partially how they're going to do it. And then the training division is the teach them how and tell them why piece. But it is all together, right? And it does fall under the fire department operations component, right? That training just doesn't go out and decide that we're going to train on something that the fire department doesn't do, or train out of context. We're going to train on something that doesn't align with what we do. I mean, when we really look at that, there's personalities. One person's opinion in the training division doesn't align with the person in operations, or they think they should be in that position. You're going to end up in two totally different places, and really what you end up with is a department divided.
Nick also brought up the rights of manhood, and we continue to see in modern fire academies Smoke Appreciation Day, where you let your SCBA run out of air, and then you have to stand up and breathe smoke until you can't take it anymore. Then we go out in the field and tell everybody never, ever breathe smoke. And we're trying to teach best practice here. Now we've got to teach survival skills, right? And your SCBA, if you're stuck somewhere, will go on bells. So how do you survive that? But how do we reconcile this, rights of manhood, as Nick puts it, with what the reality is that we should be doing in the field?
Yeah, that to me, that's that history thing, right? We're just not letting go of the way we always did it, and that we have to evolve with that. We have to start looking at and doing things differently. And our job is to make sure that our employees can do their job and provide the best service they can to the customers that we said that we're going to provide the service to, regardless of what that is. And, by putting them in a position that is causing them harm, that we know for sure causes them harm when they end up, how much of a feed can you take of this smoke? We're not doing our due diligence in our job with that, right? I mean, I could throw the be nice on that one. Yeah, you're jamming that person up, their family, and everybody else, right? For what? Like what are you really proving?
Our next member of the panel, Terry Garrison. Terry Garrison, of course, an instructor with us, fire chief from Houston, and also spent a bulk of his career as the Phoenix Fire Department as shift commander, and then on down the ranks. And here is Terry talking about some of the scars that he witnessed as fire chief.
Training scars. I can think of three separate things I want to kind of share. One of them is when we created the Command Training Center, we made a commitment to the organization, to each other, Nick and myself and John Hinton, that, that's where people should make mistakes, right? In the training. When we started to go through our incident command process and guys would make mistakes, we wouldn't beat them up. We would correct them and then kind of move forward with it. So that's the first piece. And the second piece about that specifically is that when somebody makes a mistake in training, it shouldn't be a career-ending mistake. We talked about that in the podcast before, is that, don't call them Mr. Whatever for the rest of their career because they missed something. But we do that, as firefighters. We don't let people go. But you want people to make mistakes in training so they can learn from that. The other thing I want to say about training, you asked specifically what I've seen that kind of has rubbed me the wrong way, is I was a new fire chief and I went to a department, and I think if you're a fire chief coming in or you're a current fire chief and you haven't been to the training academy and watched what's going on, you need to go, because those are the people taking care of teaching your newest members how to do things. And that first, the way they learn it first is going to last very long. So and you're responsible for it as a fire chief, so you better watch what's happening. And I remember going to a training academy, and one of the guys, really good people, but they were way off base, and they knew it by the time I left there. And one of the things they did is they go, Chief, you want to do an inspection with us on the recruits? They had 6 recruits, and I said, sure. What does that mean? So I walk up, and they would get in front of the recruit, and they would look him up and down, and they would ask him a question like, who are the council members? Who are 5 council members? And the guy knew who that was, and I thought, training value, the time is so valuable that you spend in training. Make sure you're training on what is important. That is not, if that's important to you as a training chief, that new recruit knows who the council members are, you got a problem within that organization. Your chairs are not facing, like Nick would say, the work. So that time is so valuable. Make sure you're doing it correctly. And then I remember showing up for their graduation. They were standing in front of the council. I got there a little bit late, and they're all facing the council. There were 6 of them, the same 6 guys. And they shook hands and being congratulated by the council, and then they all spun around at the same time, and every one of them had a quarter-sized burn in their forehead. And I looked over at my chief, I had tremendous amount of respect for and still do to this day, but this is the way they did things. You did not get your official fire helmet till you went through training. You earned that. So you used a plastic helmet on the front end, and each one of these guys had a burn from that helmet. So potential is scarring somebody for life.
Literally.
So when you do, it's
a badge of honor.
Yeah, you're saying things that, and I think he was as surprised as I was. But give them the equipment, teach them to do things the right way, help them do those things the right way, and then allow them to do it and to correct the behavior. It's just that simple. You don't got to be mean. You don't got to demean them. You don't got to kick them like, I was in the Army in 1974. I know what it feels like to turn right when he said left face, because I was Gomer Pyle. And it's just not necessary. It doesn't make you help remember right anymore.
Were they nice to you when you did that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Not very nice. So anyway, those are kind of the 3 things that I would say is, training time is valuable. Spend it on things that matter, which is the work and focusing on the service we deliver. And then just give them the right equipment, do what they need. Just support them in the training. See, training, we should change that to the support division. Mm-hmm. That should be the name of training.
So Terry Garrison there talking about what he's seen as far as training scars and organizational scars. And while he was talking about that, I think about something that we stopped at a department I was at, because we had a completely different set of SCBAs that we were training with, because they were training SCBAs and what we were going to beat up versus what we actually had on the apparatus. And I'm talking a whole different brand. So it was nothing even like the SCBAs. So when you put a recruit firefighter in the academy and you're giving them the opportunity to literally have hundreds of touches on that SCBA, then it's going to go sit on the truck. And depending on how busy you are and what your training regimen is, they're never going to get as many touches as they got in the academy. But yet they're going to build habits with an SCBA we don't even use. So that's just another example that he's using there, that I think, give them the right equipment. And then the training time. I mean, when we looked at a lot of times what we drift into beyond our normal mission of providing fire and rescue services to the community by, trying to memorize who the council members are. And I've seen a lot of other goofy stuff like that. It really has no place in the academy when you have such a limited amount of time to train these people right.
Right. There's some task level things that we've seen happen before I jumped a few command level, I think, training SCAR things and process things. But, a lot of organizations now are hiring like lateral transfers, and we're going to run a shorter class. And these people worked over there for 10 years and they have experience. Well, I've seen this and heard about it now several times where one of them being the SCBA. Lateral transfer person, they come in, we're going to put you through this super rapid program. And they at their previous job wore Scott air packs and never wore an MSA air pack. And then, they're good. Well, that's going to turn out to be a problem for them. Like, how does that work differently? And they can figure it out, but it's going to be a performance problem. You're setting them up for failure, right? So, and that comes back to, I think, another staffing shortage problem everywhere, and people are trying to, do lateral transfers and run shorter academies and all of that. But in some ways, who we're shortchanging is, the end user customer ultimately, because the person doesn't necessarily have the knowledge, skill, or ability that they need with the specific equipment that's available, right? People, all a hose load's a hose load. They can figure it out. And it's like, well, time matters, right? The SCBA is no, it's not. It's not the same. The radio, right? That's a totally different piece. So, taking the time to train people and doing deliberate and consistent training, I think, is important. So talking about the task level, I think that's all good. I just wanted to hit on a few, command training component pieces. So when we run a cert lab, we're doing that crawl walk piece. And then at some point you have to get to really the drill part, right? Taking it to the street, taking it to the drill ground, running full scale operations. So one thing that I'll put out there, people use the back of that communications board sometimes when we're doing classes, right? So our standard communications board that we hand out during class, and then we tell them, hey, when you're in class on the first couple of simulations, you can use, this, and then we tell them this is not to be used in the field, right? Which is why in our class now we've transitioned to, we actually have them use an actual worksheet, after, the second day, so that they're actually using something that they would that they would use in the field. So if you don't practice on a command worksheet during training, it's not going to work when you get to the car. So, to take that a step further, we're sitting around the table doing, simulation exercises, and really we're learning a process, right? And I'll just go ahead and throw this in there because everybody out there wants to talk shit about Blue Card's a communications program. Well, you're ignorant, because that's one of the 8 functions of command. It's actually a command program, not a communications program. I'd love for anybody who says that just to go through the program and find out what it actually is for themselves. But connecting all the dots. So, example, you're the first arriving IC. Well, practicing at some point, giving that size up through the windshield from your apparatus with your headset on is much different than sitting, in a classroom at a table, talking on a two-way, Motorola, camping radio basically is different than talking, on your radio with or without a microphone out in the field. So, so practicing that with your mask on, right? So that's something we all get so frustrated with. Like, when was the last time you practiced talking on the radio with your mask on, and then making sure that you were holding your microphone in the proper place, all of those pieces, or you have Bluetooth technology in your Motorola radio now. Have you actually practiced with that? So you're given priority traffic, but nobody can hear what you're saying because it's all garbled. So that comes back to that training and context thing, right? So the crawl and walk is like training piece by piece. It's kind of compared to sports. Monday, we're going to do some walkthroughs. Tuesday, helmets and pads. Wednesday, helmet and pad. Thursday, we're full scale everything. We're playing on Saturday. So you have to get to that point where you're putting it all of the pieces together. And then, from the strategic command piece, the SCAR piece, if you will, if we're not exercising as the strategic IC, sitting in a car, using the MDC that we have available to us, wearing our headset in the car with our command worksheet, the way that we're going to use it, or if you're using some other, tracking component or tracking device, actually exercising that, then we shouldn't expect, a good outcome with that. So we have to, however we train and exercise, has to line up with what we expect, what our expectation is at the end, and what we would expect to see in the field. And then I think a big piece, and multiple people throughout this have hit it, is nobody's getting fired over these things, right? And they shouldn't have to live with during a training environment. They shouldn't have to live with a nickname or something necessarily for the rest of their life. But it comes back to something I've talked quite a bit about on a lot of our podcasts, is that operant conditioning thing, and it lines up with our after action reporting stuff. So when people do good, we need to support that and reinforce that behavior, right? So that they know that they did the right thing, but that everybody else there knows. And then when they are doing something that we don't want, we shouldn't just let it slide, right? And far too often there's some scars with that. It's just like, we just got to check the box and get through this. And I don't want to deal with them, so we're just going to move on. And it's like, no, like, if you allow that to happen, then don't expect the performance to be good in the end in the field. If you're not holding people accountable to some sort of a standard during training, then in the end in the field, don't expect that they're going to perform and do what you necessarily want them to do. So yeah, John, this is a topic that we could go on forever about this.
Well, it's a great topic. I mean, I think it's something that's given me a lot. The panel hit on it. You kind of hit on it. Training should not be hazing. We shouldn't haze people during it. And we talk about it when we're doing our blue card classes a lot, that if you're in an emergency management exercise, it always seems like the better you do, the more crap they throw at you. So you've got to allow people to have successes too, instead of just like, well, now he's doing good, let's throw another curveball at him. And I think, people just get conditioned to that because they get brought up like that. One thing I wanted to ask you, Josh, before we wrap it up for today, because this is just a great topic. What's the difference between training and drilling? Those are two different things, right?
Yeah. So the training part is where we're really talking about the why. We're showing people how, and it's who, what, why, how. I mean, that's a training piece. And then the drill is like really more full scale exercise. So I'll give a simple task level one that everybody could connect to. Hose advancement. So, you're stretching off the cross leg, or you're stretching off the back, whatever it is. Well, yeah, we're going to teach people to get to the end, to get a line to the door, like masked up, ready to go. So, there's probably 60 bullet points to get through in a drill to get to that point. So throughout it, people being in the truck, getting their air pack on in the truck. Before that, even getting dressed, getting on the truck, getting your air pack on, getting your seatbelt on, wearing your headset. Like, what does that process look like? Okay, well, you got there. They pulled the brake. We're going to stretch the green line off the back of the truck. So now what does that look like? Putting that piece together. So, hey, when we stretch this line, what does that look like? We're going to deploy this thing 100 times without those other pieces, just to go over that particular component. Okay, well, now we've stretched it and we're at the front door. We're going to charge it. We need to make sure we bleed it off, make sure it's all laid out right, in line, all of those things. And then it's now we're at the door getting masked up. So, that hopefully no more than 30 seconds at the front door, hopefully closer to like 20 seconds at the front door, your mask, gloves, everything on ready to go. So, the training part is each one of those pieces. And then the drill is, okay, we're going to do hose deployment drills. Well, you get dressed, you're on the truck, you go, they pull the brake, we're stretching the green line, you get off the truck, you stretch the line, you go through that whole process. So the training part is, each one of those pieces. And then the drill is like actually the exercise of the full scale piece. So, I mean, it could be hose advancement. It can be the command piece that we were talking about, right? So in command training, we might be in a classroom and you're, looking at a simulation, slide, and you're tracking on a worksheet sitting in a room, talking on, a portable radio. Well, then the full scale drill is I got, 4 engines, a ladder, and an ambulance, and I'm at the drill tower and I'm the strategic IC and I'm in my car and I'm going to run this full scale drill based off of whatever conditions that we created to actually exercise our entire system. So we can't just jump to the drill thing and expect some sort of standard performance if we're not training on the front end. So the training really lays out like, here's the expectation. This is how we do it. This is what we want to happen. An opportunity to get people to improve, performance. And then the drill part is like that, again, that full scale exercise to evaluate how's each individual component go, but also as the entire response or how the entire organization, works together. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
Great topic today. Thanks so much, Josh. Like you said, we could go on forever about this. If anybody would like to share their thoughts with us on your training scars, John Vance at bshifter.com, Josh at bshifter.com. All that information is in the show notes. We want to thank everybody for being here today and for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and make sure you subscribe. Until next time, thanks so much for listening to B Shifter. Talk to you later, Josh.
See you, John. Thank you.